Excuse me. Can you tell me how to get to St. Louis, Missouri? You want me to move?
Oh my gosh.
Hold on, I'm getting stuck.
I'm sorry.
Gotta have ice. What is it?
523.
523?
Or right here. One of these. Right here.
Oh, so we don't get a front thing.
Not
Oh,
bad. Oh, we get water view.
Okay. So what that is? Well, that's a pretty big room. Well, what's a water view?
I don't know.
Oh, it's the river.
I was just seeing water out there.
And the arch.
Really?
Oh, we got the waterfront view.
Oh, that's awesome.
Now that's badass. Yeah. Right there's the Mississippi River.
Wow.
Right there's
Oh,
the
I see
arch.
the arch.
Yeah.
Well, this isn't bad.
Wow. Awesome. Let me check out this bathroom real quick.
We got it for 80 something and she wanted 167.
Yeah. If you showed up. That's weird.
Wish they had a jacuzzi, but I'm
Yeah.
not gonna
It's
complain.
nice and clean.
Sharps container.
Yeah, when you after you're done shooting up, pick the deals to that.
Right?
I'm just saying.
Okay.
I like it. Got an iron board and an iron if you need to use any of that.
Supposed to have.
We'll have to do a morning view of our
We're supposed
view.
to, I thought we had a microwave, but I don't guess we do. There's a
Oh,
refrigerator right there.
there's the fridge.
But I don't see no microwave.
Well, at least we didn't buy microwave food.
Well, no, we usually don't though.
Yeah. This is our morning view. Looking out of our hotel room. We'll go up in that arch later and take a boat ride. That bridge is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the Mississippi River. Overlooking Missouri there.
Look, you drive inside it.
Oh,
On
there's
top
a
and inside.
subway.
That's not bad. It's heated.
Yeah, I can feel the warmth. About the same size as the last one we were at.
Yeah.
It holds 52 people.
Doesn't seem like it, does it?
Yeah. Technically, it holds about 10 people. And this is the workout center. Got elliptical, bicycle, treadmill, some weights, drink station. It's not bad for having another amenity.
No. I don't guess we can get in there. No.
No, no hospitality. This is what we're gonna ride up in.
Wow.
We're going up the St. Louis Arch. Don't be so enthused. Of course, they're gonna pause the movie for me.
Everyone can always make a friend. I know I need more.
In 1947, a design competition was held to see what this memorial would look like, and the winner was Finnish American architect Eero Saarinen with the arch design. He'd like to see what the other designs look like, but what the memorial could have been if it wasn't the arch.
The bill that I am presenting to you will be known as a civil rights bill. Its object is to open the city of hope.
That's the hotel we stayed at this weekend.
Cool, so there's two different sides, remember? Right?
You gotta be exact. You might
Baseball field.
Look how little that tugboat.
They're very big.
There's that whole mound where we were trying to take pictures before you come in.
What do you think of those dunes, love?
It's really high. I don't know why it feels much higher than that sky though. Maybe because it's the arch.
Wow, what a great view of the city, huh?
Yeah. Here's some more.
I can imagine when it's sunny out, how much better vision you can see far, you know.
Wow, look at this view. Like, look out this little Yeah. What's this side? The river?
Yeah, you can see the hotel that we're staying at and everything over there. Shows you what you can see,
Okay.
or what you can look at when you look out there, up here.
Yeah.
Shows you what you're looking at.
That river's awesome.
loading on the south tram. South tram is now loading. We're going to start. Come on down. Car number 7.
I'm gonna take a picture of the water.
Okay, car 6. Car number 6. Okay, we'll take it up here. Okay, just go down to your tram car.
Because I know I'm going now. You know?
I got you something.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll be right.
I had to go back and get my jacket.
We're looking at magnetic souvenirs. You can't climb up there.
I thought you could. Here. Oh, he's so cute.
That's funny,
He's a good buffalo.
right?
His name is Bob.
Buffalo Bob.
Hello, Bob.
All right, act like you're rolling.
Ancestors had to come up with new terms for animals not found in France.
You're gonna go in circles.
Apologizing profusely. I mean, just,
Hey,
he said I'd rather cut my hand off than ever
Hi.
lay it upon you.
what's that building?
I don't know. It looks like a major package.
Need surgery again. It was almost and then I was doing something wrong clearly, but it was unclear within the scope of an argument what I was
There you are.
against. So it could shift from where he'd heard that I was with a friend, or I had been photographed standing too close to a male person. That was a person I had had something with, and I was lying to him about, and then accusations. I started doing things, destroying the property and screaming at me. I remember the screaming at me was the worst, because I kind of always felt like I had done, I had to defend myself. I had to tell him, so he didn't think these.
Helicopter tours. We're taking a boat tour. All kinds of shit in this Mississippi River. Basketball. See if I can ride this bad boy. Said I entered a no riding zone. I don't know. No idea.
Look at those big balls. That's how long you need underneath the container to move it.
Is there bathrooms in here?
Watch your step on the stairways, they are steep. Keep in mind, we have two sets of stairways. We have the stairways that you see as soon as you board the boat. We do have stairways on our cruise this afternoon. The boat has 3 decks. The bottom deck, the first deck level, the level that you boarded the boat at, is mostly enclosed inside. It has tables, chairs, and big windows. There is an open area at the bow. You are allowed out on that open bow area during our cruise. The first deck is also where you will find the restroom facilities located towards the Okay, we are getting underway, headed northbound, headed upstream on the Mississippi River this afternoon. You're going to notice quite a bit of driftwood in the water, and I'm going to be weaving back and forth a little bit trying to avoid the bigger chunks of it. That is a sure sign that the river is rising. When you see this much driftwood coming down the river, that means the river's rising. We expect the river to be about a foot higher tomorrow. Not a really big fast rise, but it's definitely going up. And we got more rain coming in this afternoon, this evening, so it might kick it up even higher yet. Now the river at St. Louis is the river level is measured on a gauge. Normally, if you look over to the left on the cobblestones, which are all underwater, you can see that gauge, but most of it's underwater at this point. I did check the official river level at 0830 this morning, and it was at 23.4 feet on that St. Louis River gauge. Now, that's kind of an arbitrary measurement. It doesn't mean 24 feet from any particular point. Just for your information, we're at about 44 feet of water right here, but that change, the depth of the river changes from moment to moment and location to location. Again, the official river level this morning was 23.4 feet. The all-time record high water here at St. Louis occurred in August of 1993, and it was 49.5 feet. So from 23.4 up to 49.5 feet. That 49.5 put the water up on those stairs leading up to the arch grounds. And in fact, one of those steps up there is actually marked with a high water mark from the record high water of 1993. Record low water on the Mississippi River here at St. Louis occurred in 1940 and was negative 6.2 on that gauge. So 49.5 was the high, negative 6.2 was the low. About a 56-foot range from record high to record low, or about the height of a 5-story building. Coming up on our left side, our port side, is the dock of the St. Louis Heliport. The folks there at the heliport offer helicopter aerial tours of the downtown St. Louis area. They offer several different tours at several different price points. If that sounds like something you might be interested in, you might wander over to their dock after the cruise and talk to them, see what they have to offer. There's a big chunk we ran over. Well, we'll probably be hitting a few more of those before our cruise is out. There's just a lot of driftwood out here. We're going to be passing underneath several bridges on our cruise this afternoon. The very first bridge we're going to pass underneath is also the oldest bridge across the Mississippi River here at St. Louis. It is the Eads Bridge directly in front of us. The Eads Bridge was completed in 1874. After about 7 years of construction, it was named after the designer and builder, James Buchanan Eads. Took about 7 years to build that bridge. Now, James Buchanan Eads, the designer and builder of that bridge, was essentially a self-taught engineer, and this was the very first bridge he ever designed and built. Not too bad for a first effort. Still in use 150-odd years later. The Eads Bridge has 2 decks on it. There's a top deck with a road surface on it. You'll see cars and trucks driving on there. Of course, when the bridge was completed in 1874, you would have seen horses and wagons up there on top of it. There is also a second deck with railroad tracks that is underneath the road deck. Now, mainline freight trains and passenger trains used to come into the city of St. Louis on that lower railroad deck. Mainline trains no longer use that bridge. The main issue being there isn't enough height and width clearance under the road deck for trains on the rail deck. Modern trains are bigger, physically bigger than the trains of the 19th century were. There is enough room underneath there, however, for light rail commuter trains, and the local light rail commuter system, Metrolink, will send dozens and dozens of commuter trains across the Eads Bridge every day. And I'm sure we'll see at least one commuter train cross that bridge on our cruise during the afternoon. Now, the Eads Bridge was noted for several firsts. For example, up until the building of the Eads Bridge, most metal bridges were built of wrought iron. And there is a lot of wrought iron incorporated into the Eads Bridge. However, the main structural elements are steel. And that was a first for a bridge this size. And steel was a brand new material in the 1870s. Also, those 2 bridge piers out in the river holding up the bridge, those 2 piers, the foundations for those piers extend about 100 feet below the surface of the water, down through the water, and also through the sand and mud and other sediments on the river bottom, all the way down to bedrock. And those are the deepest bridge pier foundations built up to that time. Now, James Eads, the namesake designer and builder of the bridge, was noted for several other accomplishments during his lifetime. For example, during the U.S. Civil War, he designed and built a series of iron-armored gunboats, which were used on the Mississippi River by the North during the Civil War on the Mississippi River and the tributaries of the Mississippi. As we pass underneath the Eads Bridge, we're going to be looking at the second bridge we're going to pass under on our cruise this afternoon. The second bridge here is the Dr. Martin Luther King Bridge, originally named the East St. Louis Veterans Bridge. It was built by the city of East St. Louis, located over on the Illinois shore to our right. It opened for traffic in 1951, and it was noted for being the very first road-only bridge to cross the Mississippi River here at St. Louis. There are older bridges, such as the Eads, which had road decks on them, but they also carried railroad tracks. The Dr. Martin Luther King Bridge was the first road-only bridge to cross the Mississippi River here in the downtown St. Louis area. Now, the Dr. Martin Luther King Bridge currently serves mostly as local traffic relief between the east and west sides of the river. It's not really tied in with a major interstate highway or anything like that. However, at one time, the famous Route 66 did cross the Mississippi River here on the Dr. Martin Luther King Bridge. Also, if you look at the bridge piers, you can see the speed of the water going by. We're fighting a current of about 4, close to 5 miles per hour. The current speed does pick up during periods of high water, and we are at relatively high water. Not excessively high for this time of year, but definitely not low water. Looks like we got a whole complete tree coming down the river ahead of us. A lot of these big chunks of wood coming down the river are coming out of the Missouri River. The Missouri River feeds into the Mississippi about 10 or 12 miles upstream from where we are now. And we'll see a lot of debris coming out of the Missouri River coming down this way during periods of flooding. Now, if you look a little ahead of us over on the right shore, the Illinois shore, you're going to see groups of barges tied off to the shore. These are basically barge parking lots. In river talk, they are known as fleets or fleeting areas. And they serve the same function for barges that a railroad switchyard would serve for train cars or railroad cars. It's a place to temporarily store barges while they're waiting to be loaded or unloaded or waiting to be moved north or south on the river. Most of the cargo moving on the river is bulk cargo as opposed to packaged goods. And most of the dry bulk cargo is carried in standard dry cargo river hopper barges. The standard barge, which all those visible over on the Illinois shore to our right are, they're all standard dry cargo hopper barges. They measure 195 feet in length and 35 feet in width. And when fully loaded, depending on how deep in the water you want to fill them, you can carry between 1,500 tons and maybe as much as 2,000 tons of cargo. Now, barges on the river are moved in what are known as tows, T-O-W-S. A tow of barges is a group of barges all rigidly tied together with steel cables so that the group of barges acts as a monolithic unit. And then that tow of barges is pushed upriver or downriver by what is known as a towboat. Might be more descriptive to refer to it as a push boat, but they are called towboats. You push from behind. There are basically two sizes of towboats on the Mississippi River. There are smaller ones that operate in a local area only and basically function the same as a switcher locomotive would for a railroad, moving barges into and out of loading docks and also assembling the barges into the tows of barges. And then much larger towboats will actually push those tows of barges upriver or downriver over long distances. I'll get back to barges in a minute, but over here on our left side, we got 3 big round things sticking up out of the water, and we have this abandoned-looking pavilion thingy visible over on the left side. Up until about 2011, there was a large floating casino in the water there between that pavilion and those 3 mooring cells, as those round things are called. That was the Admiral Casino. The SS Admiral, was an extremely large excursion boat built here in St. Louis in 1939 and 1940. A very large boat, many times the size of the Tom Sawyer. And for several decades, it offered daytime and evening excursions out of the St. Louis riverfront, just as the Tom Sawyer does now. A very large boat. For example, the largest dance floor in the entire St. Louis metropolitan area was on board the Admiral. Many longtime St. Louis residents have fond memories of cruises on the Admiral. Unfortunately, in 1979, the Coast Guard withdrew the certification for the Admiral to carry passengers on cruises. After that point, it was converted into a stationary, non-moving entertainment complex. It really didn't do well at that function. Later still, it was converted into a floating casino, and it was moored in the space here between that pavilion and those 3 mooring cells. And it did a little better as a casino boat. Unfortunately, in about 2011, a brand new casino complex opened up on the hill. You might notice that green building up there with the odd shape on the side of it on the left. That is the new casino complex. When that opened in 2011, that pretty much put the Admiral Casino out of business. And the Admiral boat itself was eventually taken away and cut up for scrap. And all that exists now is the pavilion and the 3 mooring cells. As we continue on upriver and I try to dodge the bigger chunks of driftwood, coming up on our left side, we have this extremely large building right on the edge of the riverbank. That is an old electric generating plant that was built in 1902, not only to supply electricity to the city of St. Louis, but also to supply electricity to the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair, which was held in Forest Park, which is located about 6 miles directly to our west, to our left. Now that building is still in operation today. It no longer produces electricity. It produces steam. Its boilers produce steam, and that steam is routed through pipelines buried in the streets of downtown St. Louis. And a lot of the large office buildings and hotel buildings in the downtown area utilize steam from the steam loop, as it is called, for heat and for hot water. Back to these barges on the right side of the river, these barge fleeting areas. Again, there are smaller towboats that work in the local area, basically shifting those barges in and out of docks and also assembling them into tows. If you look ahead of us in the river, up underneath the bridge ahead of us, we have one of these local towboats. Backing down river, looks like he's got a couple of empty barges. The St. Louis, the area of the Mississippi River in the vicinity of St. Louis is known as the St. Louis Harbor or the Port of St. Louis, and it is an extremely busy, occasionally very congested commercial shipping area. A lot of barge traffic in this area. There's basically 2 reasons for that. First of all, there are a lot of loading docks and unloading docks, loading and unloading barges in the immediate St. Louis area. For example, there are 16 loading docks in the St. Louis area that do nothing but load agricultural commodities in the barges, primarily corn and soybeans. Most of the wheat moves to the west coast or sometimes the east coast to the Great Lakes. But there's a lot of corn and soybeans moving on the river, and 99.9999% of the corn and soybeans moving on the Mississippi River in barges moves south to the port of New Orleans at the Gulf of Mexico and is destined for export overseas. So we got 16 docks do nothing but load corn and soybeans in the immediate area. But there's another reason why this area can get kind of busy and kind of congested. And that's because about 4 or 5 miles up ahead of us, directly ahead of us upstream, is the first of the 27 dams which cross the Mississippi River between the city of St. Louis and the twin cities of St. Paul and Minneapolis. Those 27 dams were built during the 1930s and very early 1940s. They were built to hold back water, creating a deep channel for navigation. Absolutely none of those 27 dams performs any sort of flood control function. And only about 1 or maybe 2 of those dams is set up to produce electricity. Those are strictly navigation aids, all those dams. Now, of course, a dam across the river blocks your boat from passing by, so there has to be a way for your boat to get through the dams. So each dam is fitted with either 1 or 2 locks. A lock at a dam is the structure of the dam which allows your boat to pass through the dam. A lock is what raises your boat to the higher water level when you're moving upstream through a dam, and which lowers your boat to a lower water level when you're moving downstream through a dam. Because of the physical dimensions of those locks at those 27 dams, the barge tows moving on the upper Mississippi River north of St. Louis are usually limited to a maximum of 15 of those standard size river hopper barges, 195-foot barges. 15 barge tows are just about the biggest you're going to see moving on the Mississippi River north of St. Louis. Now, there are no dams crossing the Mississippi River from St. Louis south to the Gulf of Mexico, so there's no locks either, so there's no artificial restriction on the size of the barge tows operating on the Mississippi south of St. Louis. So you'll see much larger tows of barges on the Mississippi south of St. Louis, especially when you get south of Cairo, Illinois. Cairo, Illinois, which is about 180 miles behind us. That is where the Ohio River empties into the Mississippi River, and that increases the size of the Mississippi River considerably at that point. Down there, you'll see barge tows of 35, even 40 or more barges in a single tow, pushed by one very large towboat. Again, this towboat just ahead of us with a couple empties. I think he's got 3 empties. He is one of those locally operating harbor boats that stays in the immediate area, basically functions like a railroad switcher engine would. Since that boat never leaves the area, the crew on boats like that usually work 12 hours on the boat and then go home for 12 hours at a time. Their work schedule would be something like 3 12-hour days in a row, 3 12-hour nights in a row, and then they'll have 3 days off, and then the schedule will repeat. Now, on the bigger towboats that actually push tows of barges long distances on the river, the crew will actually live on the boat. They'll usually live on the boat for 30 days at a time and then go home for 30 days at a time. And there'll actually be 2 complete crews on the boat at any one time, and they will work alternating 6-hour watches or shifts. This boat is vibrating a little bit. I think we've picked up some driftwood in the struts, aligning the propellers and the shafts. I'm going to go ahead and back on it a little bit, hit reverse a little bit, see if I can wash that driftwood out of there. So that's what we're going to be doing for about the next half a minute or so. Okay, back to the talk. I've talked about loading docks on the Mississippi River. There's a bunch from the St. Louis area up a little bit ahead of us on the right shore, on the Illinois shore. We have one of those 16 docks that does nothing but load corn and soybeans in the barges. Corn and soybeans come into that facility on the right by a train car and also by truck. And then eventually, though, that stuff is loaded in the barges at the river dock. They got a couple of barges over there that they are currently loading. They got one barge sitting on the outside of the dock that is fully loaded and is sitting pretty deep in the water. And they're in the process of loading a second barge between the dock and the shore. It's kind of sitting at a little bit of an angle. That means it's partially loaded. Eventually, once both of those barges are loaded, one of those local towboats, like that one over to our right in that fleeting area, one of those local towboats will grab those two barges and take them to a fleeting area where those barges will be temporarily stored until they're joined together with other barges into a tow of barges, and then one large towboat will take that whole tow of barges south. Over on our left side, you might notice this brightly colored building on the far side of the concrete flood wall. That is an old 19th century railroad freight depot. It has been unused for more than 100 years. It's a very long building, but it's also very narrow. You can actually look through the windows on one side and see daylight through the windows on the other side. It's only about 35 or 40 feet wide. Anyway, back in 2014, some people in the city decided to paint a large mural on the side of that building. That mural is supposed to depict migrating birds, and the name of the mural is Migrations. I am told it took about $125,000, about 500 gallons of paint, and several months to actually paint that mural on the side of that building. It only took the graffiti people a few weekends to cover large areas of it with graffiti.
That's fun.
Coming up on our left side, we've got another loading dock. This first dock on our left handles liquid asphalt such as used for asphalt roads, asphalt roof shingles. And a little bit past it, up on the left side, we have a second dock that deals with cement, Portland cement, ready-mix cement powder. Cement is manufactured in powder form by a cement plant about 120 miles upriver near the city of Hannibal, about 120 miles up ahead of us. And that powder is loaded into barges, and the barges are moved down here to this unloading dock just ahead of us on the left. There's a barge sitting in there. It's sitting at an angle. It has been partially offloaded. The way they offload those barges is that yellow crane will lift the ribbed gray covers off the top of that barge, open it up to the sky, and just to the right of the yellow crane, there is a large gray knuckle boom crane with a big vacuum hose on it. And that vacuum hose will actually extend down into the barge, and they will vacuum the dry cement powder out of that barge. Now, they're not going to, they were actually working on unloading that this morning, but they covered it back up, put the covers back in place. Since there is a chance of rain this afternoon, they don't want to have an uncovered barge of cement powder out in the weather. Although if it gets rained on, it will turn into a large cement block in a barge. Just ahead of us is the newest bridge across the Mississippi River here at St. Louis. This particular bridge was completed in 2014 at a cost of $695,000.38. This bridge just ahead of us carries Interstate 70 across the Mississippi River here at St. Louis. So if you're crossing between Missouri and Illinois on I-70, you'll be on this bridge directly ahead of us. Now, when this bridge was under construction, there were two groups of people vying for the rights to name this bridge. One group wanted to name it the Stan Musial Bridge, after some guy who apparently was a baseball player or something. I don't know much about baseball, so I'm not sure what was going on there. The second group wanted to name it the Veterans Memorial Bridge in honor of the veterans who have served our country, the United States of America. Eventually, the two groups reached a compromise, and the compromise was to name it the Stan Musial Veterans Memorial Bridge. Kind of a big mouthful there, so a lot of local people just refer to it as the Stan Span. This is known as a cable stay bridge. 52-foot mark on the gauge. So during the record flooding in 1993, the water got up to a little less than 2.5 feet from the top of that concrete wall. Not a whole lot to spare. Over on the left side of the boat, we have an earthen levee protecting a large area of floodplain. Now, that particular levee has had an issue with water leaking through it, seeping through it. You'll notice some construction equipment over there on that levee. There have been contractors working on that levee for a couple of years now. I think what they're doing is installing a slurry wall, basically a concrete wall down through the center of the levee. Going to give you about 3 or 4 minutes advance notice. We're going to be passing in front of the arch out in the middle of the river. If you're interested in photographs of the arch from out in the middle of the river, that'll be a good time to take them. So you got about 3 or 4 minutes advance notice on that. As we head downriver, we're heading back towards first the Dr. Martin Luther King Bridge and then the Eads Bridge. The Eads Bridge has those arches underneath it. From this perspective, you can see why the Eads Bridge is not really a favorite bridge among mariners, among people who navigate on the river. With those arches underneath it, obviously there is very limited vertical clearance between the underside of the bridge and the surface of the water, except right there in the center of all 3 of those spans. So if you have a tall boat, like say the Tom Sawyer, and you want to pass underneath the Eads Bridge, you have to make sure you pass right under the center of a span. You get too close to one of those piers where the clearance is less, you might leave part of the top of your boat behind on the bridge structure. That was a big issue after the Eads Bridge was built. A lot of steamboats lost their smokestacks and occasionally a pilot house or 2 on the underside of the Eads Bridge. And that is still a concern even to this day. As recently as 2019, a towboat pushing barges smashed its pilot house into the Eads Bridge. And as is often the case with those sorts of things these days, there happened to be a video camera pointed in the right direction at the right time, and you can actually go on the internet and see video of that towboat hitting the bridge. If you do an internet search for something like towboat hits Eads Bridge in 2019, you can find it. It's not too hard to find. Over there on the right shore, you might make note of those elevated railroad tracks. There's some elevated railroad tracks over there about 15 or 20 feet above street level. You might just make note of those because I'm going to bring those up in a minute. Now, as we're passing directly underneath the Dr. Martin Luther King Bridge, in just a moment we're going to be passing under the Eads Bridge, hopefully centered under a span so I don't have to worry about knocking off my hat. We're going to get a good view of the arch grounds. I think that's about 90 acres over there. Now, I keep hearing that the arch is the smallest national park, and I'm sure that's true. But 90 acres or so of ground, that's a huge amount of ground for a downtown city area. Huge amount of ground. What's more, all that area over there was the heart of old 18th and 19th century St. Louis. That area was city block after city block of old buildings of historical and architectural significance. And all that stuff was torn down in the late 1930s and very early 1940s in order to make room for the monument. So while St. Louis was certainly happy to get the arch, it did not come without a cost.
Oh, it goes underground.
What's more, that ground was pretty much cleared by 1941.
Train bridge, see,
Construction
it
of
goes
the arch
underneath
didn't
here.
start until I think 1963. So for better than 20 years, there was a 90-acre vacant lot over there. Now I mentioned those above-ground railroad tracks. They run right in front of where the arch is. And the people who designed and built the arch were not happy with the thought of having elevated railroad tracks and trains running in front of the arch and spoiling the photographs taken from the Tom Sawyer out in the middle of the river. But what could you do about those railroad tracks? You couldn't just rip them out. The railroad needed those tracks. There was no room in downtown St. Louis to reroute those tracks anywhere else. So what was done was a whole lot of fill dirt was brought in, and the ground was actually raised up so much that the elevated tracks became underground tracks.
Wow.
When you're up there on the arch ground, there's a couple areas to the north and the south of the grounds where you can look down and see underground railroad tracks. They pass through a tunnel directly in front of the arch. Well, keep in mind, those are elevated tracks. They are elevated above the original ground level, and the elevation of the tracks never changed. What changed was the elevation of the ground. It was filled in so much that it put those tracks underground. The ground there used to gently slope from the water's edge all the way up to the buildings in the background. So when you're huffing and puffing and climbing all those steps to get back up to the arch grounds, just think that it used to be just a nice gentle slope with no need for any steps. other than it was decided to fill that all in to try to hide those railroad tracks. Now, I mentioned it was a vacant lot for more than 20 years. If you were to come down here in the mid-1950s, you would not find it an empty vacant lot. If you were to come down here, say in 1955 or 56, you would find hundreds and hundreds of brand new cars sitting on that lot, brand new automobiles. All three major car manufacturers at that time, Chrysler, Ford, and GM, they all had assembly plants here in the St. Louis area, and they all sent brand new cars down there and parked them on that big vacant lot. And those cars were destined to be shipped by barge. It was very common to ship new cars by barge from the mid-1940s to the late 1950s. Now, that did kind of fall out of favor. There were a couple issues with that. First of all, shipping by barge, while cheap, is very slow. It took a long time to get your new car. What's more, it subjected a lot of the cars to a lot of damage. So a lot of times your car was not only late, but when you did get it, it had damage to it. So by 1960, the shipping of cars had pretty much ended by barge. Which was okay because within a couple of years, construction of the arch was going to begin, and then the big vacant parking lot was no longer available anyway. Right ahead of us is another bridge, the Poplar Street Bridge. It opened to traffic in 1967, currently carries Interstates 55 and 64 across the river. If you look at that bridge pier to the left, you'll see a row of numbers painted on that bridge pier to the left. That is the vertical clearance between the surface of the water and the other side of the bridge. If you have a tall boat and if it's high water, you better be paying attention to those numbers. Just ahead of us, we've got the Douglas MacArthur Bridge, named after the World War II general, General World War II and Korean War fame. Obviously a railroad bridge, there's a train crossing it as I speak, a coal train, a unit train, with all the cars on the same cargo. The Douglas MacArthur Bridge was completed in 1928. It has two sets of railroad tracks on it. Sometimes we see two trains on it moving in different directions. It used to also have an upper deck, an upper road deck for car and truck traffic. However, that upper deck was closed in 1981, and most of the upper deck has been removed from most of the bridge, although there's still a few pieces of it left over to the right, over the Missouri Shore on the approach stands over there. If you look down the river ahead of us, either side of the river, what you're going to see are barge fleeting areas. Any riverbank space that is not occupied by a barge fleeting area, a barge parking lot, is going to be occupied by a barge loading or unloading dock. And the river is pretty much just like this for the next 7 or 8 miles ahead of us. You're not going to find too much in the way of nature out here on the Mississippi River into the city of St. Louis. It's a very industrialized, very commercialized area. You will find a lot of commerce out here. There's a lot going on in the way of business out here. At any one time, there could easily be 500 of these barges in the immediate St. Louis area waiting to either move through northbound or southbound, or waiting to be loaded or unloaded in the area. We're going to begin our second turn of the cruise in just a moment. I'm going to talk about St. Louis's very own shipwreck. We have our very own shipwreck. Not quite as famous as the Titanic, but we do have a shipwreck. In World War II, during World War II, the U.S. Navy had a minesweeper ship named the Inaugural. It saw service in the Pacific Ocean during World War II. After the war, it ended up in the mothball fleet, as they call it, in storage, long-term storage. Eventually, in the mid-1960s, the Navy sold it as Navy surplus to some people from St. Louis who brought the minesweeper up the Mississippi River to St. Louis and tied it up in front of the arch and turned it into a tourist attraction. It was kind of a museum ship. It did not go out on cruises or anything like that. You'd pay a few bucks and you could go out on it and see what a World War II minesweeper looked like. I remember being on it as a kid, more years ago than I care to think about. At that time, it still had the 40mm anti-aircraft cannons on it, and you could climb up on the cannons and sit in the operator's seat and turn the hand cranks and aim the cannons at the people on the shore or cars on the bridges or boats in the river. But they absolutely refused to give you any ammunition, so you couldn't actually shoot anything. But anyway, it was kind of fun for kids and interesting for adults. Unfortunately, in that record high water, the record flood of 1993, right at the peak of the flood, the minesweeper broke loose from its moorings in front of the arch. The current carried it swiftly downriver. It smashed into a couple of these bridge piers directly ahead of us, and which heavily damaged it, and it went over against the left shore just to the right of this group of barges we're alongside, and it kind of rolled over on its side and sank right there. And that's where it sits to this day. It is over about 100 feet out from the left shore. There's a storm water outlet you can barely see just to the right of this group of barges we're alongside. We'll be up river past in just a second here. About 100 feet out from the shore and about 20 feet down, you'll find the remains of the Minesweeper Inaugural. In summer, when the water's a lot lower, about 15-20 feet lower than it is now, large chunks of it are sticking above water, and you get a good look at it. Unfortunately, today it is totally submerged. I can see some disturbance on the surface of the water out there, so it's leaving a bit of a wake with the current flowing past it, but you can't really see any of it. Anyway, right after it sank, there were a couple of half-hearted attempts to try to refloat it, but sunken World War II surplus minesweepers don't have a lot of value, and nobody wanted to spend much money on it, so the attempts to raise it were not successful. About all that happens to it anymore is if the water levels are extremely low, so a lot of it is above water, and if scrap metal prices are extremely high, scrap metal people will climb out on it and cut off pieces to sell for scrap. First bridge up ahead of us is the Douglas MacArthur Railroad Bridge. Just beyond that is the Poplar Street Highway Bridge with all that traffic visible crossing it. There's a lot of traffic uses that bridge. Back about, well, first of all, when that bridge was opened in 1967, it was basically two separate bridge spans, one for eastbound traffic, one for westbound traffic, resting on a common set of bridge piers. There was about a 3-foot gap between those spans. If you're underneath the bridge and you looked up, you could see daylight. Now, about a decade or so ago, some bridge engineers and highway engineers were sitting around drinking coffee and eating donuts and trying to figure out how to carry more traffic on that bridge. What they decided to do was this. They decided they would make that 3-foot gap between the two spans wider, and then add an additional lane to carry additional traffic in that gap, basically fill in the gap. So what was done was the construction people came in and they added additional concrete to the bridge piers to make the bridge piers wider, and then the entire eastbound span of the bridge, the span we're looking at with traffic moving left to right, that entire bridge span was actually slid sideways towards us about 9 feet. Now that opened up about a 12-foot gap between the two spans of the bridge, and then that 12-foot gap was filled in with an additional lane to carry additional traffic. And when we pass underneath that bridge, if you look up at the underside, you'll see where the underside of the bridge in the middle looks different than the underside on either side of it. That's because that middle lane, that middle section was added in at a later date. Over on our left is one of these barge fleeting areas. They only have one barge sitting in there. Now there's two old rusty barges in against the shore. Those are old retired barges that basically act as a dock to tie up good barges. So the only good working barge in there is this one on the outside, this great big tank barge, MPC 777. That is a liquid carrying tank barge. It is empty, floating high on the water. There's a column of numbers at each corner. 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Those are draft marks. They tell you how deep in the water the barge is sitting. It's at about the 2-foot draft, so it's empty. This particular barge is designed to carry cargoes such as asphalt or number 6 oil or bunker C oil, basically very thick petroleum substances that have to be kept hot so that they will be thin enough to pump. At normal temperatures, they're almost a solid. So that barge, all that machinery sitting on the upstream end of that green boiler there, all that machinery is a heating system designed to heat the cargo that's in the barge to keep it hot, keep it up about 170 degrees, so that you can pump it, so it'll flow through pipelines. Now up ahead of us, right along our left side, are the Docks and Material Sales Company. They do steel repairs and fabrications to both floating equipment and also loading and unloading docks. They have something kind of interesting sitting in here. Just ahead of us on the outside of their dock, they have this small barge with two black round tanks sitting on the deck. That is an old fuel flat. It was built in the late 70s. It's retired now. It's about been out in the river about as long as I have. I guess I should be retired too. But anyway, the big towboats that move up and down the river, when they need fuel, they do not stop. Time is money. I mean, on a large towboat, 6,000 horsepower towboat, I mean, an hour of time is easily $1,000. So when they need fuel, they don't stop. A small fuel flat or fuel barge like this one with the two black tanks on it will come alongside. That barge there would have carried about 100,000 gallons of diesel fuel in compartments within the hull. It also had smaller compartments up at the other end of it there that contained lubricating oil, engine oil, and those two black tanks on deck would have contained drinking water, clean water, potable water. And while the big towboat continues to move and make miles on the river, this fuel flat and the small towboat pushing it would tie off alongside. They would put hoses across. They would pump over fuel. They would pump over lube oil. They would pump over drinking water. If the towboat ordered groceries, and I'm sure they would, there's a bunch of hungry guys on there, they would be handing across boxes and boxes and boxes for a grocery order. If the towboat, big towboat, needed any spare parts or supplies, hardware, whatever they needed would be transferred. All that stuff had to be ordered ahead of time, of course. And then once all that transferring of fuel and supplies was done, then the little fuel flat would turn loose and go back to its dock, and the big towboat continues moving on the river and making miles and making money. Coming into view on the left side, our port side, is the cobblestone levee of the city of St. Louis. Now, the cobblestone levee was built over a multi-year period in the mid-19th century. It took many years to build that. All those blocks were placed by hand. I'm told the people who placed all those blocks by hand were paid a penny per block. Maybe that was pretty good money then. It doesn't sound like much now. But the whole point of that levee was to create a hard surface down to the water's edge so that horses and wagons could come down to the water's edge and pick up and drop off passengers and freight from steamboats. Without that hard surface levee, all you had was a mud riverbank, and wagons and horses would not be able to get anywhere near the water's edge. They'd get stuck in the mud. Steamboats were extremely important to the city of St. Louis. Keep in mind that until the East Bridge was completed in 1874, that's the East Bridge up ahead of us with the arches up there. Until that bridge was completed, which brought the railroad to town, the main way of getting freight and passengers in and out of St. Louis was by steamboat. If we were, say, in this exact same spot in 1855, first of all, we would not be underneath the highway bridge. Second of all, we would see dozens and dozens of steamboats nosed in against this cobblestone levee, loading and unloading passengers and freight. There were several different steamboat companies in those days, and each steamboat company had their own distinctive landing whistle signal, a series of long and short blasts on the whistle that their boats would blow when their boats were coming into town. The whole point of that was to notify people in the downtown area that one of their boats was coming into town. And if you were expecting passengers or freight or something on one of their boats, well, that was your notification that your stuff was about to arrive. Just like now, if you got something coming from FedEx or UPS, you get a text or an email. Well, in 1860, what you got was a whistle signal. Now, the company that owns the Tom Sawyer goes back to about 1884, and we had our own landing whistle signal from those days, a series of 4 blasts on the whistle, 1 long, 2 short, 1 long. And to honor that tradition, and also to announce our arrival back at the St. Louis riverfront and the end of our cruise in just a few minutes, I'm going to go ahead and blow that landing whistle signal on the horn. I see some people getting ready for the horn already. Yeah, I'm going to be blowing the horn 4 times. If everybody's ready for the horn, here we go. Hey, don't go ahead and blow it again. Oh, no, just kidding, just kidding. Hey, the crew and I want to thank you all for cruising with us on the Tom Sawyer this afternoon. If you're from out of town, we certainly hope your visit to St. Louis is an enjoyable one. If you're from the local area, we're especially glad you came down to the riverfront to see us today. We're going to be docking in a few minutes. Please watch your step on the stairways, and especially at those yellow painted areas as you're disembarking. Don't forget to take all your stuff with you. If you put down a hat or a package or a coat or something, don't forget that. Don't leave anything on the boat. If you brought a boyfriend or husband with you, be sure to take them as well. Most of the stuff we put in the lost and found box we don't have to feed, but we do have to feed them. So again, thank you very much for cruising with us on the Tom Sawyer on this slightly overcast but so far rain-free early spring day.
We're back at the hotel. There's the Arch, St. Louis. I recommend you bring your own food though, because there's no food around this place, which is weird. Looks like one of those trains you'll find coming out of New York. Chicago, yeah. I can't even read none of that. Looks like all scribble scrabble. You should go out there and put your gang sign up.
Should I?
Yeah.
What's my gang sign? GG?
GG in the place to be.
I guess.
That's funny.
So what are we doing?
Well, we decided to try out this pool. It's 5 feet. Is it warm?
Feels like bath water.
That ain't too bad. It's a little coolness, but not like super hot where you're like...
Oh, I think it feels pretty good. What do you think?
I think so.
I think we'll be alright. It's warmer than the other pool,
I don't have any here.
isn't it?
Yeah. Let me check out this jet and see what kind of pool.
Check out what?
This jet that blows water in it. Oh wow.
I wish I had
That's pretty badass.
jets. Oh wow.
Pretty in the jets.
Oh wow, that's pretty cool.
I can see you up there, love.
I'm the queen.
Everybody's the queen in this pool.
Look, here. See, I'm the
Yeah,
queen.
I can see you waving.
Wow, I'm the queen. Oh, I have to wait like this if I'm the queen.
Is that how she waves?
Something like that.
What do you call it?
That's the queen wave.
Yeah.